They walked in wearing Italian suits, thinking they were the predators. They thought the billionaire in the corner booth was an easy target. They thought the security cameras were their biggest threat. But they made one fatal mistake. They didn't look at the waitress. They didn't notice that the hands pouring the water didn't shake when the guns came out. In the next few minutes, 5 dangerous men are about to learn that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the man with the money. It's the woman with the tray. This is the story of how a waitress's hidden past saved a CEO's future. The Azure Vault was the kind of restaurant where the menu didn't list prices. Located on the 45th floor of a downtown skyscraper in Chicago, it offered a panoramic view of the city lights, a glittering ocean of electricity that made the people below look like ants. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. Riley adjusted the collar of her uniform. It was stiff, uncomfortable, and intentionally nondescript. Black trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest. She was 28, with hair pulled back into a tight, severe bun that pulled at her scalp. To the patrons of the Azure Vault, she was furniture. She was a ghost who refilled water glasses and replaced silverware. That was exactly how she liked it. Table 4 needs a refresh on the sparkling water. The maitre d', a nervous man named Jean-Paul, whispered as he whisked past her. And for God's sake, Riley, smile. Mr. Cole is looking particularly dour tonight. Riley nodded, her face a mask of professional indifference. She picked up a chilled crystal pitcher and moved across the plush carpet. She moved with a silence that was unnatural, placing her feet in a way that distributed her weight perfectly, making 0 sound. It was a habit from a life she had buried 3 years ago, a life that didn't involve tips or aprons. At table 4 sat Sebastian Cole, the billionaire CEO of Cole Dynamics, a logistics and defense contracting firm that moved everything from microchips to medical supplies across war zones. He was 42, handsome in a weary, jagged way, wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Riley's annual rent. He was staring out the window, ignoring the untouched plate of sea bass in front of him. "More water, sir?" Riley asked softly. Sebastian didn't turn. He just tapped the rim of his glass. "Please." As she poured, Riley's eyes automatically scanned the room. It wasn't something she tried to do, it was a reflex. Sector A, clear. Kitchen entry, clear. The elevator doors, opening. The elevator chimed, a soft, polite sound that cut through the low hum of conversation. 5 men stepped out. Riley stopped pouring. The water level in Sebastian's glass was exactly 1 inch from the rim. Most people wouldn't have noticed anything wrong. The men were dressed in expensive charcoal suits. They were groomed, clean-shaven, and moved with purpose. But Riley saw the details that civilian eyes missed. She saw the way their suit jackets didn't drape quite right around the waist and under the armpits, the telltale bulk of shoulder holsters and waistband carry. She saw the way their eyes didn't look at the host stand or the view. They triangulated the room, instantly locating exits and cameras. They moved in a diamond formation. 1-point man, 3 in the middle, 1 rear guard. This wasn't a dinner party. This was an extraction team, or an execution squad. "Is something wrong?" Sebastian asked, noticing Riley had frozen. Riley placed the pitcher down on a side table. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the customer service sweetness. "Mr. Cole, do not look up. Do not turn around. Is your security detail inside the room?" Sebastian frowned, confused by the sudden shift in her tone. "My bodyguard, Frank? He's in the restroom." "Why?" "He's not coming back," Riley said, her eyes locked on the reflection in the window. The rear guard of the 5 men had just diverted toward the restrooms. "You have about 10 seconds before this goes bad." "Excuse me." Sebastian started to turn, his arrogance flaring up. "Who do you think you—" "I said don't turn," Riley hissed. The command was absolute. It was the voice of an officer, not a server. Sebastian froze. The 4 remaining men were moving through the dining room. They weren't rushing. That would draw attention. They were gliding. The leader, a tall man with a scar running through his left eyebrow and cold, dead eyes, adjusted his cuffs. Riley recognized the walk. Military but private sector. Mercenaries. They were 20 feet away. "Listen to me," Riley murmured, picking up a heavy linen napkin. "Under the table now. If I tell you to move, you move. If I tell you to run, you run." "This is insane," Sebastian whispered, though his hand was trembling as he reached for his wine glass. "No," Riley said, watching the leader reach into his jacket. "This is a hit." The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. The low hum of conversation died as the leader of the group, the man with the scar, stopped 10 feet from Sebastian's table. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He pulled a suppressed pistol from his jacket. The long, black silencer looked alien and terrifying against the crisp white decor of the restaurant. "Sebastian Cole," the man said. His voice was gravel, accented, maybe Eastern European or Russian. "Your contract has expired." Screams erupted. A woman at a nearby table dropped her fork, the clatter echoing like a gunshot. Patrons scrambled, diving under tables or freezing in their chairs. Jean-Paul, the maître d'hôtel, fainted dead away near the wine rack. Sebastian Cole stared at the gun barrel. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals, a man who stared down senators and competitors, but looking into the black eye of the pistol, he turned pale. He couldn't move. The fear paralyzed him. "Get up," the gunman ordered. "You are coming with us. If you resist, we kill everyone in this section." 2 of the other men fanned out, their weapons drawn now, sweeping the room to keep the civilians pinned down. They were professionals. No wasted movement. They ignored Riley, who was standing slightly behind Sebastian, head bowed, hands clutching the silver serving tray against her chest like a terrified shield. To them, she was collateral damage. A panicked waitress. "Please," Sebastian stammered, raising his hands. "I can pay you. Whatever you want. Double it." "Money is not the mission," the leader said. He stepped forward, reaching out with his free hand to grab Sebastian by the lapel. "Move!" As the leader's hand closed around Sebastian's suit, Riley moved. It wasn't a frantic, desperate lunge. It was a kinetic explosion. Riley dropped the heavy silver tray. As it fell, she didn't watch it. She stepped into the leader's personal space. Her left hand shot up, not to block but to trap. She caught the slide of the pistol, pushing it offline, away from Sebastian's chest. The heat of the barrel burned her palm, but she didn't flinch. In the same motion, she drove her right elbow into the leader's throat. Crunch! The sound was sickeningly wet. The leader's eyes bulged. He gagged, his trachea compromised. He tried to pull the trigger, but Riley had jammed her thumb behind the hammer, if it was external, or gripped the slide so tight it couldn't cycle. She twisted the weapon violently against the joint of his thumb. The gun clattered to the floor. Riley didn't stop to admire her work. She grabbed the leader by the back of his neck and slammed his face into the edge of the mahogany table. He went limp, crumbling to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. The restaurant was silent for one heartbeat. Then, chaos! Hostile! One of the other men shouted. Riley kicked the leader's gun under the table, toward Sebastian. "Stay down!" she roared at the CEO. The second attacker, a bulky man with a shaved head, was closest. He raised his weapon, aiming not at Sebastian, but at Riley. He was 10 feet away. Too far to strike, too close to miss. Riley didn't retreat. She grabbed a steak knife from the table. Heavy, serrated steel with a wooden handle. She didn't throw it. That was for movies. She flipped it into a reverse grip and vaulted over the table. The gunman fired. Thwip, thwip. The suppressed shots tore into the upholstery of the booth where Riley had just been standing. Stuffing exploded into the air like snow. Riley landed in a crouch and surged forward. She was faster than they expected. Much faster. She came in low, slipping under the gunman's line of sight. He tried to adjust his aim, but she was already inside his guard. She drove the heavy handle of the steak knife into his solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him, then swept his legs. As he fell, she delivered a precision kick to his temple. He hit the floor and didn't move. 2 down. 3 to go. Riley stood up, her chest heaving slightly, her hair coming loose from the severe bun, framing a face that was no longer the invisible waitress. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and terrifyingly calm. She looked at Sebastian, who was cowering under the table, clutching the tablecloth. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice steady amidst the screaming civilians. "We need to move to the kitchen. Now." The remaining 3 men, the one from the restroom and the 2 who had been covering the crowd, were regrouping near the entrance. They realized the plan had gone sideways. They weren't looking at the billionaire anymore. They were looking at the waitress. "Kill her," the man from the restroom shouted. Riley grabbed a heavy bottle of Dom Perignon from a nearby ice bucket. She weighed it in her hand. "Stay behind me," she told Sebastian, "and keep your head down." The dining room of the Azure Vault had transformed into a war zone. The elegance of the crystal chandeliers and the velvet drapes clashed violently with the sharp crack of suppressed gunfire. "Move!" Riley screamed. She hurled the heavy bottle of Dom Perignon with the precision of a baseball pitcher. It wasn't a random throw. She aimed for the lead pursuer's firing hand. The bottle spun through the air, a blur of green glass and gold foil. It connected with a sickening crunch against the gunman's wrist, just as he squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide, shattering a floor-to-ceiling wine rack behind them. A red waterfall of vintage Cabernet cascaded onto the floor, mixing with the glass shards. The gunman howled, dropping his weapon and clutching his shattered wrist. Riley didn't wait to see the result. She grabbed Sebastian by the back of his expensive Italian jacket and shoved him toward the swinging double doors of the kitchen. "Go! Through the doors. Do not stop for anything." Sebastian stumbled, his leather-soled shoes slipping on the slick floor, but terror gave him speed. He burst through the kitchen doors, with Riley right on his heels. The kitchen was a stark contrast to the dining room. It was bright, loud, and smelled of garlic, searing steak, and panic. A dozen chefs in white coats froze, spatulas and pans in hand, staring at the billionaire and the waitress crashing into their sanctuary. "Everybody out," Riley commanded. Her voice cut through the noise of the exhaust fans. "Back exit, now, go!" The urgency in her tone broke their confusion. The staff dropped their tools and scrambled toward the rear fire exit. "Where are we going?" Sebastian yelled, panting heavily. He looked like a man whose world had just been turned upside down. His face was pale, sweating profusely. "Service elevator," Riley said, scanning the room. She grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from a burner, dumping the searing scallops onto the floor without a second thought. "The main elevators will be locked down by their hacker. The stairs will be trapped. Service is our only chance." Behind them, the kitchen doors swung open. The remaining 2 mercenaries entered. They moved tactically, sweeping their weapons left and right. They didn't care about the fleeing chefs. Their eyes were locked on Sebastian. Riley shoved Sebastian behind a stainless steel prep counter. "Stay low." She waited. She listened to their footsteps on the tile. Tap, tap, tap. They were splitting up to flank the counter. Riley took a breath, centering herself. In her mind, she wasn't waiting tables anymore. She was back in operation. black sand. She was back in the cage matches in Southeast Asia, where she had honed her reflexes after the military discharged her. She was a weapon. As the first mercenary rounded the corner of the prep table, Riley didn't strike him. She struck the environment. She swung the cast-iron skillet upward, smashing the handle of a valve on a steam pipe running along the wall. The valve sheared off. A jet of superheated steam blasted outward with a high-pitched shriek directly into the mercenary's face. He screamed, blinding white pain overwhelming his senses. He fired his weapon wildly into the ceiling, staggering back. Riley stepped through the steam like a wraith. She swung the skillet again, a brutal, horizontal arc that connected with the side of his head. He dropped like a stone. The second mercenary, hearing his partner go down, rushed the aisle. He saw Riley standing over the fallen man. He raised his gun. Riley was exposed. She had no cover. But she had the kitchen. She kicked a rolling cart filled with flour bins toward him. It wasn't heavy enough to stop him, but it forced him to step sideways. That split second was all she needed. She grabbed a chef's knife from a magnetic strip on the wall, a 10-inch blade of Japanese steel. She threw it. It wasn't a kill shot. She didn't want to risk missing. She aimed for the center of mass. The knife buried itself in the mercenary's shoulder, right in the deltoid muscle. His arm went dead instantly, the gun falling from his numb fingers. He roared in anger and charged her, abandoning the gun to tackle her. He was huge, easily 250 pounds of muscle. He crashed into her, driving her back into the stainless steel counters. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Pots and pans clattered to the floor. They grappled on the slippery tiles. He was strong, trained in grappling, trying to crush her windpipe with his good arm. Riley didn't panic. She used his momentum against him. As he pushed her down, she wrapped her legs around his waist, locking her ankles. She drove her thumbs into his eyes, forcing his head back, then shifted her hips and torqued his neck. Snap! The mercenary went limp on top of her. Riley shoved the heavy body off her and scrambled to her feet. She wiped a smear of blood, not hers, from her cheek. "Mr. Cole," she called out, her voice raspy. Sebastian peeked out from behind the counter. He stared at the carnage. 3 bodies in the dining room, 2 in the kitchen, and standing in the middle of it all, his waitress, looking like a god of war. "Who?" Sebastian whispered, his voice trembling. "Who are you?" "Right now," Riley said, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the heavy grey doors of the service elevator. "I'm your only chance of seeing tomorrow." They reached the service elevator. Riley punched the call button repeatedly, her eyes glued to the kitchen entrance, expecting more gunmen to burst through at any moment. "We need to barricade the door," she muttered. She grabbed a heavy industrial shelving unit on wheels, loaded with sacks of potatoes and onions, and dragged it in front of the kitchen swing doors. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it would buy them seconds, and seconds were the currency of survival. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open with a heavy, grinding sound. They stepped inside. It was a freight elevator, the walls lined with padded quilts to protect furniture. It smelled of cardboard and garbage. Riley hit the button for the parking garage, sub-level 2. As the doors closed, sealing them in, the silence was deafening. The adrenaline that had kept Sebastian moving began to curdle into shock. He slid down the wall, sitting on the dirty floor, his head in his hands. "I'm dead," he muttered. "They're going to kill me. They knew my security was gone. They knew exactly where I was sitting." Riley leaned against the control panel, checking the magazine of the pistol she had taken from the last mercenary in the kitchen. It was a Sig Sauer P226. Standard issue for private military contractors. 12 rounds left. "They had inside intel," Riley said, her voice flat. "They knew the shift change. They knew Frank's bladder schedule. Someone close to you sold you out, Sebastian. Sebastian looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. How do you know all this? You poured my water 5 minutes ago. You recommended the sea bass. Now you're stripping a firearm like a Navy SEAL. Riley didn't look at him. She racked the slide, chambering around. I wasn't always a waitress, and you weren't always a billionaire. We all have pasts. I need to know, Sebastian insisted, a spark of his CEO authority returning. If I'm going to trust you with my life, I need a name. A real one. Riley hesitated. She looked at the floor indicator numbers counting down. 40, 39, 38. My name is Riley, she said softly. That part is real, but before I came here, I worked for a unit called Grey Horizon. Sebastian's eyes widened. The ghost unit? The one Congress disbanded 3 years ago after the scandal in Venezuela? We weren't disbanded, Riley said, her expression darkening. We were burned, disavowed, left to die. I was the only one who made it out of Caracas. She looked at him, her gaze piercing. So I know what it looks like when powerful men decide someone is expendable. And right now, Mr. Cole, you are expendable. The elevator shuddered violently. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. The emergency red light bathed the small metal box in a bloody glow. The elevator screeched to a halt. What happened? Sebastian cried out, scrambling to his feet. They cut the power, Riley said. She looked at the panel. They were stuck between the 20th and 19th floors. They know we're in here. They're not going to let us reach the garage. Riley looked up at the ceiling hatch of the elevator. Boost me up, she ordered. What? Cup your hands. Boost me up to the hatch. We have to climb. Climb? Are you insane? We're 20 floors up. Would you rather wait here for them to drop a grenade down the shaft? Riley snapped. Move! Sebastian, realizing he had no choice, cupped his hands. Riley stepped into them, her boots digging into his palms, and vaulted up. She pushed the emergency hatch open. Cool, oily air from the elevator shaft rushed in. She pulled herself up onto the roof of the elevator car. It was dark, greasy, and terrifying. Cables stretched up into the infinite blackness above. Give me your hand, she called down. She reached down, grabbing Sebastian's wrist. With a grunt of effort that strained the seams of her uniform vest, she hauled the billionaire up through the hatch. They stood on top of the metal box, the wind from the shaft whistling around them. Now what? Sebastian whispered, looking at the ladder running up the side of the shaft. We climb up? No, Riley said, pointing down. We slide. She pointed to the thick, grease-covered steel cables. The brakes are engaged on the car, but the counterweight cables are free. If we rappel down, we can reach the maintenance access on floor 10. I can't do that, Sebastian said, shaking his head. I'm a businessman, not a stuntman. Riley grabbed his lapels, pulling him close. The red light from below illuminated her fierce determination. Listen to me. There is a team of killers coming down the stairs right now. They will open those doors in less than 2 minutes. If you want to see your company again, if you want to find out who betrayed you, you wrap your jacket around those cables and you slide. Do you understand? Before Sebastian could answer, a metallic clang echoed from above. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the shaft, originating from 10 floors up. There they are! A voice shouted. Open fire! Bullets pinged off the metal roof of the elevator car, sparking like fireworks. Jump! Riley screamed. She grabbed one of the thick, greasy cables, wrapped her legs around it, and slid into the darkness. Sebastian, screaming in terror, did the same. They plummeted into the abyss of the shaft, the friction burning through their clothes, racing against gravity, and the bullets raining down from above. The descent was a blur of friction and terror. Riley's boots smoked as she clamped them against the steel cable, using the thick rubber soles as a makeshift brake. Above them, the muzzle flashes of the mercenaries' rifles lit up the shaft like a strobe light in a nightmare. Bullets sparked against the steel girders, pinging dangerously close to their heads. "Brake!" Riley screamed. They were approaching the 10th floor. Riley clamped her legs harder, her muscles screaming in protest. The sudden deceleration jarred her spine. Sebastian, less controlled, slammed into the top of the counterweight assembly 10 feet below her with a heavy thud. He groaned, rolling onto the greasy metal platform. Riley dropped down beside him. Her hands were raw. The palms of her uniform blistered despite the cloth she had used. She didn't check them. She checked the door. "Get up," she hissed, hauling Sebastian to his feet. He was limping, clutching his ribs. I think I broke something," he wheezed. "You're breathing. You're walking. It's not broken, it's bruised. Move." Riley jammed the crowbar she had swiped from the elevator roof into the seam of the 10th floor doors. With a grunt of exertion, she leveraged them open. They spilled out onto the floor. It wasn't an office. It was a construction zone. The 10th floor was in the middle of a complete renovation. The air was thick with the smell of drywall dust, wet concrete and sawdust. Plastic sheeting hung from the ceiling like ghostly curtains, and the floor was a maze of exposed wiring, steel studs, and pallets of supplies. Riley kicked the elevator doors shut, jamming a piece of rebar into the mechanism to keep it from opening easily from the outside. "Darkness is our friend," she whispered. The floor was lit only by the faint glow of the city coming through the unshaded windows. She pulled Sebastian behind a stack of drywall sheets. "Sit. Breathe." Sebastian slumped against the gypsum. He looked at his hands, covered in black grease and blood. He looked at his suit, torn and ruined. Then he looked at Riley. She was already moving, stripping off her restrictive server's vest to reveal the white button-down underneath. She tore the sleeves off, tying one around a gash on her forearm. "Why?" Sebastian asked, his voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? You could have run. You could have blended in with the other staff." Riley paused, tightening the knot with her teeth. She looked at him, her eyes dark in the shadows. "I told you," she said. "I know what it's like to be sold out. When I saw them walk in, I saw the same look in their eyes that the men in Caracas had. They weren't just going to kill you, Sebastian. They were going to make an example of you. And I don't let bad men win." "Not anymore." Sebastian swallowed hard. "I can give you anything. Money, a new identity, a house in the Alps. Just get me out of here." "Focus on staying alive first," Riley said. She checked the Sig Sauer. 7 rounds. Not enough for a firefight. She needed to be creative. She scanned the construction site. To a civilian, it was a mess. To Riley, it was an arsenal. Nail guns, high-voltage power cables, bags of cement, acetylene torches. "Do you know who owns this building?" Riley asked. Sebastian nodded. "My company manages the logistics for the renovation. We supply the materials." "Good," Riley said. "Then you know the layout. Where is the freight access? Not the elevator, the external hoist." "North side," Sebastian said, pointing through the plastic sheeting. "But it's external. It's a cage on the side of the building. If we go out there, we're sitting ducks for snipers." "We're not going out," Riley said, a grim smile touching her lips. "We're letting them in." A loud clang echoed from the elevator shaft. The mercenaries were rappelling down. They were cutting through the doors Riley had jammed. "They're here," Riley whispered. "Stay low. Do not make a sound unless I tell you to. I'm going hunting." Riley disappeared into the maze of plastic sheets and steel studs. Sebastian sat alone in the dark, the billionaire reduced to a frightened child, listening to the heavy boots of the killers stepping onto the concrete floor. The mercenaries moved with tactical precision. There were 4 of them now. The reserve team had joined the hunt. They wore night vision goggles, green cyclopean eyes glowing in the dark. They moved silently, communicating with hand signals. The leader of this squad was a man named Kruger. He was a giant, carrying a suppressed submachine gun. He tapped his headset. Target is on floor 10. Confirmed entry. Sweep and clear. Eliminate the woman first. She is the threat. The package is soft. They fanned out, moving through the plastic curtains. Riley was watching them from the rafters. She had climbed a scaffolding tower and was perched on a steel beam, 10 feet above the floor. She held a heavy bucket of industrial adhesive, quick-dry cement mixed with epoxy. She waited until the point man passed directly underneath her. She tipped the bucket. The sludge hit the mercenary with the force of a wet anvil. It covered him from head to toe. He gasped, the heavy mixture clogging his night vision goggles, blinding him instantly. The weight knocked him to the ground. As he thrashed, trying to wipe the blinding goop from his face, Riley dropped. She landed behind him, not making a sound. Before he could scream, she struck him with a heavy wrench she had found. 1 blow to the temple. He went limp. 1 down. Riley grabbed his submachine gun, an MP5, and 2 spare magazines. Finally, some firepower. She faded back into the shadows, just as the other 3 mercenaries turned toward the noise. "Contact rear!" Kruger shouted. "Light them up!" They opened fire, shredding the drywall where Riley had just been. White dust exploded into the air, creating a thick fog that rendered their night vision useless. They tore off their goggles, blinded by the glare of their own muzzle flashes reflecting off the dust. Riley was already moving to the next trap. She had rigged a high-voltage cable, stripped of its insulation, across a narrow corridor formed by pallets of bricks. It was ankle height, invisible in the dust. The second mercenary, rushing forward to flank, didn't see it. His boot caught the wire. Zap. The arc of electricity threw him backward. He convulsed, his muscles locking up as 220 volts surged through him. He fired his weapon into the ceiling as he fell, screaming until he lost consciousness. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" Kruger roared. "It's a trap! She's rigging the floor!" Silence fell over the construction zone. The dust settled slowly. Sebastian, hiding behind a generator, watched in awe. He had seen movies. He had read books, but he had never seen violence like this. It wasn't glorious. It was efficient. It was terrifying. Riley wasn't fighting them. She was dismantling them. Riley moved to Sebastian's position. She pressed the MP5 into his hands. "Do you know how to use this?" she whispered. I've been skeet shooting," Sebastian stammered. "Point it at the bad guys. Pull the trigger." "Don't hit me," she said. "I need you to be the bait." "What?" "They've stopped moving. They're digging in. I need to draw them out. You're going to yell at them. Are you crazy?" "Trust me," Riley said, her eyes intense. "Yell. Tell them you'll pay them double. Get their attention." Riley vanished into the dark again. Sebastian took a deep breath. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He stood up, keeping behind a steel pillar. "Hey!" Sebastian shouted. "Kruger, is that your name? Listen to me. I can pay you $5 million right now. Cash transfer. Just walk away." "$5 million?" Kruger's voice echoed from the other side of the room. "The price on your head is 20, and my reputation is worth more." "Who's paying you?" Sebastian yelled, desperation in his voice. "Who wants me dead this badly?" "You don't know." Kruger laughed, a dark, harsh sound. "Your partner, Arthur, he said you were getting too sentimental, too soft for the merger." Sebastian froze. The blood drained from his face. Arthur Penhaligon, his mentor, his best friend for 20 years, the man who was the godfather to his niece. It was impossible, and yet it made perfect sense. Arthur had been pushing for the ethically questionable merger with the chaotic arms dealer in Yemen. Sebastian had blocked it. While Sebastian was paralyzed by the revelation, Kruger signaled his last man. "Flank him. He's distracted." The last mercenary moved, creeping around the perimeter, aiming for the spot where Sebastian's voice had come from. He raised his rifle, seeing the silhouette of the CEO. He took a breath to steady his aim. He didn't hear the nail gun. Riley stepped out from behind a pallet of insulation, 3 feet away from the sniper. She held a pneumatic nail gun connected to a portable air compressor she had quietly pressurized. Thump, thump, thump. 3 3-inch framing nails slammed into the mercenary's shoulder and hand. The rifle clattered to the floor as his hand was pinned to the wooden pallet next to him. He screamed, pinned like a butterfly in a display case. Kruger spun around, realizing he was the last man standing. He was alone. He didn't fire. He grabbed a grenade from his belt. "Enough games!" Kruger shouted. "If I go, we all go!" He pulled the pin. "Run!" Riley screamed at Sebastian. Kruger threw the grenade. It bounced across the concrete floor, rolling toward the pallets of flammable insulation where Sebastian was hiding. Riley didn't run away from the blast. She ran toward it. She saw a heavy steel bathtub, part of the luxury renovation, sitting on a dolly nearby. With a roar of effort, she kicked the dolly, sending the heavy cast-iron tub sliding across the floor. It tipped over, landing directly on top of the grenade just as it detonated. Boom! The explosion was muffled, contained by the heavy iron, but the force launched the tub upward, slamming it into the ceiling before it crashed back down. The shockwave knocked Riley off her feet. Shrapnel peppered the walls, but the blast was contained. Kruger stared in disbelief. Impossible. Riley stood up from the dust. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. She looked like a demon. She raised the nail gun. "Game over," she said. Kruger went for his sidearm. Riley fired. A single nail caught him in the knee. He collapsed. She walked over to him, kicked the gun away, and stood over him. She looked at Sebastian, who was trembling, staring at the smoking bathtub. "We need his phone," Riley said, panting. "We need to know where Arthur is." Sebastian walked over, his face hardened. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold fury. He looked down at the mercenary. "Arthur Penhaligon," Sebastian said, his voice low and dangerous. "Where is he?" Kruger groaned, clutching his shattered knee. He's in the lobby, waiting for the confirmation photo." Sebastian looked at Riley. "You saved my life. Now help me take mine back." Riley nodded. She picked up the MP5. One last floor to go. The lobby of the Coal Dynamics Tower was a cathedral to capitalism, a silent, cavernous expanse of Italian marble, glass, and cascading water features that usually hummed with the energy of 1,000 employees. Tonight, however, it was a tomb. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous drone that seemed to amplify the silence rather than break it. Arthur Penhaligon sat on a plush velvet sofa near the central fountain, the water's gentle ripple mocking the storm he had unleashed 40 floors above. He held a crystal tumbler of 25-year-old single malt scotch, rolling the amber liquid around the glass. He was 60 years old, with the silver hair of a statesman and the cold, calculating heart of a shark. To the world, he was the benevolent co-founder of a logistics empire. Tonight, he was a man waiting for a confirmation of death. He checked his platinum Patek Philippe watch for the 3rd time in a minute. It had been nearly half an hour since Kruger, the lead mercenary, had radioed that the target was pinned down in the construction zone. "It's taking too long," Arthur muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the vast emptiness. Kruger promised efficiency. This feels messy. Standing by the revolving glass doors was Graves, Arthur's personal bodyguard. Graves was a mountain of a man, built like a vending machine and just as expressive. He adjusted his earpiece, his eyes scanning the dark plaza outside. "Kruger is an artist, sir," Graves rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly. "He doesn't rush the final strokes. If he's silent, it means he's working." Arthur took a sip of the scotch, the burn settling in his chest. A shame about Sebastian, really. He had vision. He just lacked the stomach for the realities of the modern world. You can't build an empire on morality, Graves. Morality is a luxury for the poor. Sebastian didn't understand that the Yemen contract was necessary for our survival. "Yes, sir," Graves replied dutifully, though his eyes remained fixed on the elevators. Suddenly, a sound cut through the stillness, the soft, melodious chime of an elevator arrival. Arthur stood up, smoothing the creases of his bespoke suit. He composed his face into a mask of shocked grief. He rehearsed the lines in his head. "My God, I heard gunshots. I was so worried. Surely it was a robbery gone wrong." He expected the gold-plated doors to slide open and reveal Kruger, perhaps wiping blood from his hands, nodding a silent confirmation that the deed was done. The doors hissed open. Arthur's smile died before it could even form. The glass tumbler slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot, sharp and violent, sending shards of crystal and expensive scotch skittering across the polished stone. It wasn't Kruger. Sebastian Cole stepped out of the elevator. He looked less like a CEO and more like a survivor of a trench war. His navy suit, once worth thousands, was shredded, hanging off him in tatters. He was covered in a ghostly layer of white drywall dust from the construction site, mixed with smears of black grease and dark blood. His arm hung limply at his side, and a jagged cut above his eyebrow dripped fresh blood down his cheek. But it was his eyes that froze the blood in Arthur's veins. They weren't the eyes of the gentle, philosophical partner he had known for 20 years. They were the eyes of a man who had looked into the abyss and climbed his way back out. Beside him stood the waitress, Riley. She looked terrifying. The white button-down shirt was torn and stained, her hair wild and loose, framing a face that was bruised but utterly unyielding. Slung across her chest was an MP5 submachine gun, held with a casual familiarity that screamed soldier. She didn't look at the architecture. She scanned the room, identifying cover points, sight lines, and threats in a single heartbeat. "Sebastian?" Arthur whispered, the name catching in his throat like a fishbone. You're alive." "Disappointed?" Sebastian asked. His voice was a rasp, dry and cold as liquid nitrogen. He stepped out of the elevator, his shoes leaving dusty footprints on the pristine marble. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Arthur." Arthur took a stumbling step back, his composure shattering. "I don't know what you mean. I was waiting for you. I heard noises upstairs. I was just about to call the police." "Save the performance," Sebastian interrupted, his voice gaining strength. He walked toward the fountain, closing the distance between them. "We have Kruger's phone, Arthur. We have the encrypted texts, the wire transfer confirmation to the Cayman account. You authorized a hit squad to execute me in a restaurant full of civilians." Arthur stopped retreating. He realized with a sudden, chilling clarity that the charade was over. There was no talking his way out of this. The mask of the benevolent uncle fell away, revealed the sneering, arrogant narcissist beneath. "You left me no choice, Sebastian," Arthur spat, his voice rising. "You were going to kill the merger. That Yemen deal is worth billions. You were letting your bleeding heart get in the way of our legacy. Legacy? Sebastian stopped 5 feet away, shaking his head slowly. Is that what you call this? Hiring butchers to slaughter people over a shipping contract? You haven't built a legacy, Arthur. You've dug a grave. Arthur's face twisted in fury. He looked toward the door. Graves! Kill them both right now. Graves moved. He was fast for a big man. His hand went to the heavy-caliber pistol holstered under his jacket. He drew the weapon, leveling it at Sebastian's chest. Riley didn't raise her submachine gun. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she calmly raised her left hand, revealing a small, black industrial detonator she had taken from Kruger's belt upstairs. Her thumb hovered over the red button. "Don't," Riley said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that stopped Graves cold. "She's bluffing," Arthur screamed, pointing a trembling finger at her. "Shoot her, you idiot! It's just a garage opener." "Is it?" Riley locked eyes with Graves. She spoke to him, ignoring Arthur entirely. "I spent the last 20 minutes coming down through the service shafts. I didn't just climb down. I rigged the load-bearing columns in the lobby atrium with C4 charges I took from your team upstairs. This building is a glass cage. If I press this button, the structural integrity fails. The ceiling comes down. We all die. Right here. Right now." The silence that followed was absolute. Graves looked at the detonator. Then he looked at Riley's eyes. He had been in the business of violence long enough to recognize a killer. He saw the dust on her clothes, the blood on her knuckles, and the absolute lack of fear in her gaze. He realized that this woman had single-handedly dismantled a 5-man elite hit squad upstairs. "She's not bluffing," Graves whispered. "Shoot her," Arthur shrieked, his face purple with rage. "I pay you to pull the trigger, not to think." Graves looked at Arthur, a desperate, sweating old man in a suit. Then he looked at Riley, a warrior holding the keys to the apocalypse. "I don't get paid enough for suicide missions," Graves said. He slowly engaged the safety on his pistol, placed it on the floor, and kicked it toward Sebastian. "I quit." Graves turned and walked toward the revolving doors, leaving his employer alone. "You coward!" Arthur yelled after him. Panic overtook him. He scrambled for the discarded pistol on the floor, his hands shaking violently. "If he won't do it, I will!" Arthur's fingers brushed the cold steel of the gun. He raised it, aiming blindly at his partner of 20 years. But he was too slow, and he was too weak. Sebastian lunged. It wasn't the move of a trained fighter, but it was fueled by 20 years of betrayal. He kicked the gun out of Arthur's hand, sending it skittering across the floor. He grabbed Arthur by the lapels of his jacket and slammed him back onto the velvet sofa. "It's over, Arthur," Sebastian growled, leaning in close. "Look at you. You thought you were a kingmaker. You're just a thief with a checkbook." Arthur stared up at him, gasping for breath, his eyes wide with terror. "Sebastian, please. We're brothers. Think of the company. Think of the stock price." "I am thinking of the company," Sebastian said, his voice breaking with raw emotion. "That's why I'm cutting out the rot." Outside, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Blue and red lights began to flash rhythmically against the glass walls of the lobby, painting the marble in chaotic strokes of color. "The police are here," Riley said softly, stepping up beside Sebastian. She finally lowered the detonator. "I triggered the silent alarm in the elevator shaft 10 minutes ago. There are no explosives, Graves." But he didn't need to know that. Sebastian released Arthur, who slumped back against the cushions, defeated and weeping. Sebastian straightened his ruined jacket, wincing as his bruised ribs protested. He looked at Riley, a look of profound respect and gratitude. "You saved my life," he said, quietly. "And you saved my soul." 3 days later. The scandal had dominated the global news cycle. Arthur Penhaligon had been arrested, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, corporate espionage, and embezzlement. The evidence found on Kruger's phone was irrefutable. Coal Dynamics stock had initially plummeted, but then surged to record highs as the story of the CEO's survival and his purge of the corruption captured the public's imagination. Sebastian sat in his corner office on the top floor. His left arm was in a sling, and a neat line of stitches ran through his eyebrow. He was looking out at the Chicago skyline, but he wasn't looking at the buildings. He was looking at his reflection. The intercom buzzed. "Sir, there's a woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says her name is Riley." Sebastian smiled, a genuine warmth reaching his eyes for the first time in days. "Send her in immediately." The heavy oak doors opened. Riley walked in. She looked different. The server's uniform was gone, replaced by dark jeans, heavy boots, and a leather jacket. Her hair was down, softening her features, but she still walked with that predatory grace, moving silently across the plush carpet. She stopped in front of his desk and reached into her pocket. She pulled out the heavy gold signet ring Sebastian had given her in the ambulance. She placed it gently on the mahogany desk. "I came to return this," she said. "I figured you'd want it back. It looks expensive." "Keep it," Sebastian said, not even glancing at the ring. "Consider it a severance package from your waitressing job. I heard you quit." Riley smiled, a rare, guarded expression. "I can't stay in the city, Mr. Cole. My face was on the news. The police report. People from my past, from the old unit, they might see it. I need to disappear again." Sebastian stood up, walking around the desk. "Running is exhausting, Riley. I watched you fight an army with a nail gun and a bag of flour. You weren't built to run. You were built to stand your ground." He picked up a thick blue file folder from his desk and held it out to her. "What is this?" she asked. "An offer," Sebastian said. "Head of Global Security for Coal Dynamics. I'm restructuring the entire company. I need someone I can trust to watch the shadows. Someone who can see the threats before they walk through the door." Riley hesitated. She looked at the folder, then at Sebastian. "You know what I am. You know what I've done. I'm not corporate material. I'm damaged goods." "We're all damaged," Sebastian replied firmly. "That night in the restaurant, you didn't just save me because it was your job. You saved me because you hate bullies. You have a moral compass, Riley. It points true north, even if it's a little cracked." He stepped closer, extending the folder again. "Full autonomy. You pick your team, you pick your resources, and I promise you, I will use every lawyer and connection I have to wipe your slate clean. No more looking over your shoulder. No more hiding in plain sight." Riley looked at him. For 3 years, she had been a ghost, drifting from town to town, waiting for the past to catch up. But looking at Sebastian, a man who had faced death beside her and didn't blink, she realized she was tired of being a ghost. She reached out and took the folder. It felt heavy. It felt like a future. "I'm expensive," she warned, a glint of humor returning to her eyes. "I'm a billionaire," Sebastian countered with a grin. "Try me." Riley extended her hand. "When do I start?" Sebastian shook it firmly. "Right now. I have a lunch meeting in an hour, and honestly, I'm terrified of the menu." Riley laughed, a bright, free sound that filled the office. "Let's go." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a routine dinner service turned into a war for the soul of a billion-dollar empire. Sebastian thought his wealth was his power, and Arthur thought his treachery was his weapon. But they both forgot the most important rule of survival. Never underestimate the person serving your water. Riley wasn't just a waitress. She was a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. In a world full of arrogance and suits, it was the invisible woman who held the true strength. It makes you think, doesn't it? How many heroes are walking past us every day in disguise? How many people are hiding extraordinary skills behind a simple uniform, just waiting for the right moment to step into the light? If this story had your heart racing, please do me a huge favor and smash that like button. It helps the channel grow and tells me you want more high-stakes thrillers like this one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I drop fresh dramas every week, and I want to hear from you. If you were Riley, would you have taken the job, or would you have kept running? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.